Welcome to The Hypnotist, the show that gives you inside access to cutting-edge hypnosis with real clients facing genuine issues. Brought to you by the hypnotherapist demanded by celebrities, CEOs, and even royalty, Adam Cox. These recordings took place live from Adam's clinic in London's world-famous Harley Street. This podcast features powerful hypnosis, so do not listen while driving or operating machinery. This recording is not suitable for those with epilepsy or severe mental health issues. So, get yourself comfortable and enjoy today's episode of The Hypnotist.
Hi, it's Adam here, and on today's episode of The Hypnotist, again, it won't be me being your hypnotist. We have a guest hypnotist. I'm very fortunate to be joined by Turan Mirza. Welcome to the show, Turan.
Good morning. Welcome. Glad to be here.
Great to have you here. So one of the things I found fascinating, meeting so many different hypnotherapists, is that there's very different reasons why people get into this world of hypnosis and hypnotherapy. So tell us a little bit about you, your background, and how you gravitated to this world we call hypnosis.
Indeed. Well, it all started, when I was born. No, I won't go that far back. Well, for 27 years, I was a software engineer. I became a software manager and a director of engineering for a major technology company, working from telecoms into the oil and gas sector. And in parallel to that, along that way, about 2010, probably before 2010, I used to do what I call silly dad magic for my kids. You know, the usual, where'd that coin come from behind your ear? Nothing that I would no sort of magic tricks I would do in front of other people, just I'll say the phrase, inflicted on the children. And I saw it was actually Derren Brown, an episode of Derren Brown, a couple of shows of Derren Brown, and I thought, I could do that on the kids. Now, at the time, I thought it was a magic trick, and so I started just Googling them. We're talking 2010 when the internet, if you were even born, Adam, the internet was in its infancy, and took me a time to figure out that this is actually a thing called hypnosis. And like most people, I don't know if the most people includes your audience, but like most people, this doesn't really, it's just compliance, it's just playing along. This stuff isn't real. So I read up on it, and I said to myself, something's missing here. What's the trick? They're telling me on these books how to do it, but it can't be that easy. There must be something I'm missing. So I went on an inductions training course with a lovely guy called James Tripp. And during that time, I'll say the phrase, I learned everything, but I learned nothing. It's no way an insult to James. James was a brilliant trainer, but I realized, I did learn a lot of things, thanks for that. Just coining a phrase there, but I learned, I did know how to do this stuff. And obviously we practiced during the training course, and on it was he was in England at the time. I think he's now in Edinburgh in Scotland. So I was flying home from Stansted back to Belfast, and I hypnotized my first person at the airport in the Dixon's travel shop. And from there, that's where life changed. I started off just going out in the streets of Belfast and hypnotizing people, again, just as a curiosity, just as a hobby, to understand how this works and to really get to grips with it. And I learned so much from that street hypnosis experience. And then people sort of came up to me and said, here, you just made him forget his name. I just stick people's feet to the floor, give them name amnesia. They couldn't say their name. Somebody came up and said, you made him forget his name. Can you make me forget I smoke? And at that time, I'd focused on just getting people into hypnosis. I hadn't overly studied the therapeutic side of things, but I thought, I can make people forget their names. We've been doing it for months. And by that time, probably done 20, 30, maybe 100 people. I don't know, I lost count at that stage. And I gave it a go, and the guy stopped. And the rest, again, is his history from there. I just
tell us about that first time in Dixon's, because I think, I've done some street hypnosis, and it is a daunting thing when you've never done it before to go up to a stranger and, because a lot of it is is based on the premise and is based on the intent and the congruency and all those kind of things. So tell us about that very first experience.
I know you said it's a daunting thing, but I think maybe it was because the timing was right. Um, I've just come from 2 days training, um, and practicing. I mean, I say the first time hypnotizing someone outside of the classroom. I practiced various things in the classroom. I had a hire car, so drove back to the airport, parked the car, came in, and I went into, as again, I'll be sexist here, it's probably a sexist thing to say, us men going in and looking at the laptops and the cameras and Dixon's travel store in the airports. Um, I'm sure lots of women do that as well. But anyway, and I was chatting with one of the girls, the sales assistants, and it was like 8 o'clock at night. And I thought, God, this place is empty. And as I walked away and walked out of the store, I thought, you know what? I should have hypnotized. I should have practiced because they look bored. So, and to be honest, I mean, you talk about daunting, I sort of almost said that's not really daunting, but I was all fired up and excited with my new toy. And so I said, right, I'm gonna go back in, and if no other customers are in the room, I will hypnotize one of the sales assistants. Now, it sounds very easy, but I walked around very slowly, giving lots of people time to go into Dixon's, so I wouldn't have to do it. Walked around the whole of the Stansted Airport, went back into Dixon's, not a soul. But the girl I'd been talking to had disappeared, and there's two fellas. So again, stereotypical, walked up to them, standing next to the cameras and building a bit of rapport, said, so which one's better, Canon and Nikon and stuff, and had a bit of a chat about cameras. And then I got up the courage to say, God, you just look bored. And they said, yeah, 8 o'clock at night on a Sunday night, not a lot of people come in. I says, do you want to see some entertainment? And they said, why? What do you do? I says, I'm a hypnotist. I can hypnotize you, which outside of the classroom technically wasn't true because I'd never hypnotized anybody before. And in good macho style, they said, oh, do her over there. And the girl that I'd been speaking to before appeared. I don't know where she was, in the staff room or something. She just caught her my eye. And then they shouted across, he wants to hypnotize you. And she says, yeah, okay, I'll have a go. So I did a simple hand stick. I stuck her hand to the table, and then I took her hand and put it on her head, and she couldn't move her hand from her head. And well, the rest is history. Now, I will say I remember her name only because her name's the same name as my daughter. Her name was Zara. And my daughter's name's Zara. So that's the moment. Obviously, if that had have went terribly wrong, I probably would have never hypnotized anybody again. I'd still be writing software and managing software engineers and stuff. But that was the catalyst. It all changed that day.
Yeah, and I think it's a in the magic world, they say you can't really talk about like the tricks and the secrets. There's that kind of a code. I think it is worth exploring one thing that I find fascinating, and that is this kind of, I look at it as two circles of a Venn diagram. There's this kind of real hypnotic phenomenon, and then there's things that aren't necessarily hypnosis, but can be great convincers of something that they can't explain, which then can facilitate some of the other forms of hypnosis. So when we look at things like magnetic fingers or arm levitation and things like that, not all of it is the hypnotic suggestion. Some of it is the mechanics of the body position and other things. Do you have certain things when you're doing street hypnosis to give you an easy win, to give you a convincer, let's say, for the person you're working with?
Well, I'm a great believer in hypnosis itself. So I will do the magnetic fingers, but I'll reserve it. Put it this way, one of the great things I've learned from street hypnosis is the failures. And one of the reasons I speak a lot about street hypnosis and advocate that hypnotherapists should learn street hypnosis is because in a therapy room, you're going to go slow, you're going to go structured, stay safe, maybe read a script to make sure you get it right. But you're losing out on a lot of spontaneity. Um, so if I do an induction and it doesn't work, and I do another induction and it doesn't work, then I'll do magnetic fingers, because I know, as you say, that's not necessarily completely hypnotic, but very much on the tendons and whatever else. And if the fingers stay apart after about 5 minutes, probably exaggerating there, I know why the other two inductions didn't work. It wasn't me doing something wrong. It was they were worried and they were resistive there, because the fingers will come together, you know. So I'll never go for the easy win. I'll use that as the check to see why the other things didn't work. Yeah. So I'll maybe do a hand to face induction, or magnetic hands coming together um, type induction. And if that doesn't work, I'll say, right, now put your fingers up like this here, and clasp, and you'll see the fingers nice and tight together. So the tendons are straining. And if the fingers stay apart, all right, they don't want this. Yeah. And you don't want to have that in the therapy room. But you're understanding that helps me understand people and helps me understand hypnosis. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
No,
I
it
do use
does.
it, but it's not as a primary, not as
Yeah.
an easy win.
And I think also sometimes information's coming back all the time. So if they are very resistant, then there might be that polarity response, and they're getting their significance from being the one that can't be hypnotized. And I remember you used to do, it really kind of resonated with me when you said that, you called yourself a hypnotist when you hadn't hypnotized anyone at that point. And a few years ago, I volunteered to be a hypnotist for a spider phobia workshop. And the premise was I would come in, hypnotize a room full of people, and they'd be holding tarantulas afterwards. But I'd never done that before. I'd never worked with a single phobia client. But I just had this kind of deep conviction. It wasn't daunting for me at all. It was just kind of like, I can do this. It won't be a problem. And I did the session, and they're all holding tarantulas and holding spiders at the end. And I thought, wow, I can do this. It was kind of like a convincer for me more than anyone else.
Exactly.
But when I was doing these kind of group hypnosis sessions, there was this thing that I found really useful. And I would do the kind of the book and balloon kind of deepener and that kind of stuff. But I had this phrase, because at the end they would kind of look at their hands, and some people would be like really wide apart, and some people would be quite close together. And then I had this line which was, and the key thing is that hypnosis is suggestion. So the key thing isn't how much your arms are moved apart, it's the fact that they're up there to begin with. And that was kind of like a real kind of twist for them, because they were like, yeah, I followed that suggestion, completely. And my hands were, kind of there. How far apart was almost kind of insignificant, but it was always good when they saw that kind of massive difference in style. So
That's it.
we're both at the Irish Hypnotherapy conference in Dublin in April, and you're going to be talking about street hypnosis, and in particular how street hypnosis can help hypnotherapists. I get a sense that confidence is one of those things that is going to give hypnotherapists. What are the other benefits of hypnotherapists learning some of the street techniques?
It's about confidence. It's about knowing your intent. When I talk to a lot of hypnotherapists, or even lay people that don't know anything about hypnosis, and they say, "Oh, will it work?" You've got to believe. I mean, it's probably linked to confidence in a way, but it's number one, having that confidence, know this stuff works. I usually use another S word for that. The stuff works. I'll say it today, but and also once you know it works, um, just facing someone saying, "I'm going to hypnotize you today," and having that intent, and that unquestionable intent, you know, and as you heard from my passion about how I learned, and just going out in the streets. I went out in the streets of Belfast. I went to my first convention. This is why I think the Irish one is such a beautiful one. Back in 2015 was my first hypnosis convention in Las Vegas, Hypnothoughts Live. And so I went out in the streets of Las Vegas and hypnotized there. I've been streets of London, streets of Edinburgh, whatever, hypnotizing people, and I gained so much from street hypnosis. And as my journey describes, I did that before I went into therapy. That I use a lot of the tools and using a lot of techniques, as you talk about calibration, constantly, giving compliance instructions, sit there, can just put your feet flat on the floor. People don't have to have their feet flat on the floor to be hypnotized, but it's just looking for that compliance and calibrating completely. So it's feeding all that information across, and showing the parallelisms, because and there's we were chatting just a few seconds before the mic went live, about, traditionally, uh, some trainers, I'll not blacken everyone by this, some trainers will say, well, you don't want to do that entertainment stuff. It will cloud the professional hypnotherapy. We're working with depressions and anxieties, post-traumatic traumas. We don't want to do that entertainment stuff. I've found it's helped me so much. I now, deliver training on street hypnosis to hypnotherapists, and they gain so much more insights into their therapy work. It's not about training them to go out and do every week and start charging for street hypnosis. It's about, you know, the nuances and the skills you gain from doing street hypnosis that will help your therapeutic practice. So rather than saying, oh, distance yourself from it, you should be connecting with it.
Yeah. And I think it's probably worth, just because there's a lot of people that listen that love hypnosis but don't necessarily, never been taught hypnotherapy or hypnosis and those kind of things. So it might be worth defining the difference between stage hypnosis. Most people get that hypnotherapy is for therapeutic change. Stage hypnosis and street hypnosis, though, there might be a distinction there useful for the listeners at this point.
To be honest, there's very little difference, which again surprises people. So stage hypnosis is what I would say is pre-planned, premeditated. That sounds like you're going to murder somebody, right? Pre-planned. Okay, so I will put up a poster saying I'm in the town hall in 2 weeks' time, and people start buying tickets and say, oh, I'm going to hypnotist in 2 weeks' time. Oh, and next week is the hypnotist. Oh, tomorrow night I'm going to the hypnotist. And during that process, they're already hypnotizing themselves. They're saying, oh, I think I'll go up on stage. No, I think I'll just watch, but my husband's going to go up on stage or my wife's going to go up on stage. There'll be all this pre-talk in their own minds building up to it. So it's all pre-planned, and again, there'll generally be a large audience. And several people coming up on stage, maybe 6, maybe 12 people, depending on the audience size and the stage size and whatever. Street hypnosis, on the other hand, is you probably are heading on your way to Belfast, to Dublin, to Manchester, wherever you live. No intent, you need to get something from Marks and Spencer's, or just going out for a bit of window shopping for the day. No thought of being hypnotized, didn't realize there was going to be a hypnotist wandering around the streets. And somebody bumps in and you say, have you got 5 minutes? I'd just love to show you something wonderful about your mind. I'm doing some entertainment today. And you go, what is it? Oh, I'm a hypnotist. Oh, okay. Give it a go. So it's very impromptu. The audience generally is one other person, the person you were walking with, your wife, your husband, your friends, whatever, wandering around the town. So it's a lot more personal. It's a lot more impromptu, and it has two sides to it. Number one, if you're doing a stage show and things just don't go too well, you've disappointed a whole audience that's been waiting 2 weeks to see it. If I hypnotize someone out in the streets and they weren't expecting to see me, if it doesn't go right, well, one audience member gets disappointed. Maybe the subject themselves get disappointed, and that's it. It's over. So everybody always says to me, oh, street hypnosis is very hard because bang, there's no pre-talk in their mind. 2 minutes ago, they were walking along. Next minute, they're being hypnotized. That takes a lot of, power, a lot of skill to do that. If you have that confidence, if you have that intent, it will work. But hypnosis isn't like the movies, as we always say. It's, we're not taking control of somebody's mind. We're not making them do something they don't want to do. If they might say, yeah, I'll have a go, but they sort of have their nose scrunched up, and, I'll have a go. And again, we're calibrating. We're reading their facial expression, reading how their shoulders are hunched. And you're saying, well, I don't think this guy really wants it. But I'm prepared to give it a go because I have that intent and have that confidence. And sometimes it won't work. Not because I'm a bad hypnotist, not because he's a bad subject or she's a bad subject. It's just the moment wasn't right. The rapport wasn't there. And I've got a beautiful video. I've got a YouTube channel There's about 730 videos, 1.4 million views on YouTube. But the one I love most, well, I love them all, like, but I walked up to a guy. This was at a Queen's University in Belfast, has like a Comic-Con type event. It's a anime costume event. So if you watch the video, they're all dressed up. One guy's dressed up as a stormtrooper, and I try to hypnotize him and his girlfriend, and it bombs. They don't get hit. There's the girl sort of goes into hypnosis, but she pops out very quickly before we could do any skits, and they walk away. And if that's the only bit of the video you see, you'll think, oh, he's a rubbish hypnotist, or he and the boy and girl are terrible subjects. But then 42 minutes, and I know it's 42 minutes because I constantly audio record, but only video record when somebody gives me permission to come on camera. So the audio was 42 minutes later. He comes up to me again and says, I want to give it another go. And I hypnotize him. I stick his feet to the floor and make him forget his name. He's a perfect subject. And I love that video because it shows that, hey, I was a great hypnotist. But it failed the first time because the magic wasn't there. The moment wasn't there. Maybe he thought I was going to pickpocket his wallet. Maybe he thought I was going to cluck like a chicken and do something silly. But then he'd watched me do other people. So he thought, oh, I like what he's doing there. I do want to have a go. So when he came up, the moment was different. It was the same hypnotist, 42 minutes apart, hardly, not even an hour, same subject, but the hypnosis was totally different. And that's very empowering, so I don't mind things going wrong. And that rarely happens if somebody comes back. If something bombs like that there, they don't come back and you think, oh, go home, I'm a terrible hypnotist. But it's having that confidence to know that bombed, but something wasn't right.
Yeah. I think that's a really important thing because a lot of the time people are afraid to try something in case they fail. And then even if they did it, because they've got that fear, it's tentative. They're not being congruent. The intention lacks that kind of, you're not projecting that confidence to the participant. But I've always had this thought, not always actually. I used to be terrified of taking risks and doing new things. But now these days I have this belief that when you try things, you either win or you learn. It either goes the way you want it to go, or you're going to get some form of insight back, even if what you learn doesn't happen all the time, doesn't need to, but you're still getting something back. Turan, how important is it when you do street hypnosis that you communicate, I'm a hypnotist, I'm going to hypnotize you? And does it work if you don't have that? Because in a way, that's a really condensed pre-talk. In a way, it sets up an expectation.
Yes, it's a large part of my YouTube channel over the years. So in the early days, I would just upload videos. Nowadays, what I will do is upload maybe a 4-minute clip, and then I'll talk about what happened in that clip. So it's like a tutorial. And again, like I say, I have a mic. And it's constantly recording. And just in terms of saving battery space and memory card space on the camera, I only record when somebody says, yes, I'm happy enough to be videoed. Nowadays on the videos, I will play the audio with a still, frame to listen to my walk up so that people understand how many minutes, how many hours, people say, but you hypnotized them before the camera was turned on. You will hear me walk up to someone and within 30 seconds, 36 seconds, something like that there, and say, hi, I'm doing some street hypnosis today. Would you like to be you're hypnotized? Yes. Okay. Do you mind if I have a video? Yes. And the camera goes on and I'm straight into an induction. No other pre-talk. Now, I'm there with a camera person, right? It's not a big broadcast camera. It's just a little camcorder, but I use a camcorder on somebody standing there with a mobile phone. They've got a monopod, so it looks, a piece of technical equipment. I have a T-shirt that says Hypnotist in the back, which they don't always see in the back of me because I'm walking up to them, but it says Feel Good Hypnosis, which is my trading name, my branding name. So I'm there and I'm confident. Hi, I'm here to do some entertainment. Would you like to be hypnotized today? And I'm saying that knowing I'm about to hypnotize you. That's my intent inside me. If they say, oh, sorry, no, and a lot of people do. And again, that's part of, I think, the learning process for hypnotherapists is getting that rejection, but it's not rejection. Some people just don't want to be hypnotized. Or maybe if it's in a busy street, somebody's nipped out for lunch to grab some sandwiches, get back to work in half an hour. They don't have time. So you ask people and they say, sorry, no. But you just don't, you look down at the ground to see if that hole opens up and swallows you, and it doesn't. And when that hole doesn't appear, you get that confidence in itself to just ask somebody else, oh, well, it's not a failure. Sometimes, as I say, you'll do an induction and it just doesn't, click. Again, that hole doesn't appear. And that builds that confidence that when you do hypnotize people, you just go. And the first one, I mean, that stormtrooper was probably the first one of the day, so he hadn't seen me do anybody else. After a while, as he did, other people will come up. I mean, I did a Christmas solopreneurs lunch last week, where lots of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, got together for lunch, and as you do, did some hypnosis at the party. And I'm doing another lunch next week, and somebody in a comment on LinkedIn said, "Oh, you're going to be doing some hypnosis then? I would love to see it." So I'm already getting getting requests to do more impromptu hypnosis at that event. So let's see how it goes. And I'm confident to do it. Yeah.
Amazing.
Same with networking situations, again, in terms of the hypnotherapy. And it's not just for the hypnotherapy side of it, but as hypnotherapists, one of the things that I recommend that helped me well in my business was networking. And again, being able to stand up and say, right, I'm going to do a demo here. Best way to understand how hypnosis works is to demo. Can I have a little subject and have somebody come up the front and just hypnotize them? And again, you can't spend 20 minutes doing a progressive muscle relaxation. You'll bore the audience. So you have to do something quick as you're doing street hypnosis. And when people see, wow, that really works, then you get the referrals. So it's part of the hypnotherapy business, maybe not directly related to it in the session, but street hypnosis and having that confidence in a room of 20 people to say, right, do you want to see a demo? Or there was one time where I was, standing up doing my 60-second pitch, and people were enthralled because they'd never met a hypnotist before. And somebody just says, "Can you hypnotize me now?" And I said, "Yeah." And they went, "Oh, no, thanks." But they'd already felt that confidence from me. "Yeah, do you want to do it now? Let's do it now." And I believe that was felt in the room. I was there. I was ready to do it. Now they backed down. No, just asking. Yeah. Not saying they were chickening around. They just didn't expect that answer, because a lot of hypnotherapists will say, "Oh, can you hypnotize me now at a party or at a networking event?" Well, probably now is not the right place. But if you want to come next Wednesday about 2 o'clock, you can come round and give you a little mini session and a little taster. The moment's lost, in my mind anyway. Saying, yes, let's do it, and then having other people see it and they go, wow, look what he just did.
And what is an ideal thing to do in that kind of situation? Let's say a hypnotherapist listening, they've not done much stage or street hypnosis or rapid inductions before. What's a great thing to do that may be fairly easy to learn if you have got that conviction, that confidence? What's a good thing to do as a demo?
Well, yeah, I'm going to lead into that with another story because I taught my son how to do it. And I did that, leading into another story now, bit of Ericksonian stuff here. So shortly after I'd learned, and this was, on Christmas Day. Now, my sister-in-law was round for Christmas dinner, and my sister-in-law probably shouldn't be saying this on a podcast for eternity, but my sister-in-law is my wife's twin. And I don't know if you know any twins, but my sister-in-law, would say anything to contradict me. If I said, "Oh, it's looking quite dark out there," "No, it's light." It's getting a bit cold out. "No, it's warm enough." She would never say anything to please me. And so I hypnotized her on Christmas Day, and my son, up until then, had thought people are just playing along with you. This is not real hypnosis. They're just being compliant and being nice to you. But he knew Catherine wouldn't do anything just to be nice. So when I hypnotized her and she couldn't speak, and I hypnotized her to forget the number 7, he went, this stuff is real. So he came out with me when I'm talking about camera pacing. A lot of times he'll come out, he'll hypnotize someone, and I'll video him, and then vice versa. He'll be my camera person. He was actually the one that started the YouTube channel. And so I said to him, I've got to stop sticking people's feet to the floor, because I'm doing that for everyone. And it was him beautifully said, but the next person that comes along has never had their feet stuck to the floor, so it's new to them. And great insight. This is where I don't know if you have any kids. There's great insights when you start learning from your children and they give you words of wisdom. But I realize, you don't have to think of 101 different skits to do. If you stick people's feet to the floor, that's mind blowing for them. But he also said to me, people, because he's sitting watching behind the lens and watching the reactions, whereas I'm focusing on the subject, not seeing the audience, not seeing the passers-by that are stopping and watching. He says, just doing a hypnotic induction, dropping them into hypnosis so their head drops onto their chest, and then waking them up again and send them on their way. If you do no feet stick, if you do no skits at all, that's mind blowing to people that aren't familiar with hypnosis. And again, that's one of the things I teach. Don't think I have to do this skit, then that skit, then that skit, and do. I'll do maybe 5 or 6 skits, and the subject's really good. I'll go for 20 minutes. Yeah, doing one skit after another, because I'm used to it. But just to hypnotize someone, drop them in, maybe do a fractionization, 1, 2, 3, wide awake, into sleep, and they just drop down again. You can see that change in their complexion, their face, and then from 1 to 5, and on the count of 5 you'll be awake, fully awake. All hypnosis will be gone. 1, 2, 3, wide awake, and that blows people's minds. And I learned that, from my son, thankfully, but from doing the street hypnosis, and I don't think you'd ever get that understanding how mind blowing just a fast induction is from sitting in the therapy room, seeing clients for an hour, and then the next one coming in. With street hypnosis, I'll hypnotize someone, as I say, maybe 10, maybe 15, 20 if they're a really good subject. So every 10 minutes, and then they walk away and say, do me next. And you're straight into doing, you don't have time to think. So maybe in an hour, you'll do 5, 6 people back to back to back. And that's really when you're learning at an unconscious level yourself about hypnosis, where you're not having time to think about it. For most hypnotherapists, when you start out, you'll see maybe 1 person the first month, maybe 2 people the second month, and then it starts to build up. So you're having a month between when you hypnotize people. To me, it's not the way to learn.
No, you've got to learn through immersion. And I think, my philosophy is that you learn before you earn. And in the early days of being a hypnotist, I kept myself so busy because, not to make money, I wasn't making any profit at that particular point, but you get better the more you do something. I always believe that you can't learn to swim by reading a book. You've got to dive into the pool, and I think hypnosis is particularly like that. You're going to do some kind of demo session for us, but before we do that, you've mentioned your YouTube channel, you've mentioned your brand. If people are curious to learn more about you, see your stuff, learn from you, where can they go for more information?
So it's Feel Good Hypnosis if you just Google that, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, that works. Feel Good Hypnosis is the fast way just to search, you'll find me. My website is feel-good.today. And everybody says, is that a com or .co.uk? No, it's just a .today. So feel-good, FEEL-GOOD.today. That's where you can find my website. And again, there's links to all my social media platforms from there. So love people to check out my videos. Make sure to give me a like and a subscribe, as the saying goes. I say that in every single video. Yeah,
definitely check Turan out there. And we're both going to be talking at the Irish Hypnotherapy Conference in Dublin, early April. So if you're interested in seeing Turan there, it's irishhypnotherapyconference.ie, and there's some good rates available on tickets right now. But Turan, you're going to be doing something for us, so I'm happy to put myself on mute and leave it over to you. But if you want to interact in any way, I won't mute myself.
I want to do some quite audible. And a nice technique I do a lot with a lot of my clients is around self-talk. And I don't know if you have any sort of self-talk yourself and things going through your head. Um, would you, if you do, and if you don't mind sharing, um, it'll help me describe the process. And the lovely thing about this process is I explain, I run through the process with my clients, I explain why it's working, and then I encourage them to take it and share it with their family, their friends, whatever, if anyone helps. So I don't know, do you want me to do an abstract example, or do you have
Yeah.
anything?
Well, I'm thinking like generally my inner dialogue is pretty good. It's quite motivating, quite encouraging. But I would say when I do get anxious, there is that classic kind of what if something bad happens, and every now and then there'll be that voice that says, right, you won't be able to handle that. You're gonna embarrass yourself. You're gonna make a mess of that, something like that. So that it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I hear it and I feel it in my gut.
Beautiful. So, again, I'm listening to everything my client says, and as soon as they say the phrase like, what if something bad happens? Again, if it was a driving test, I'm never going to pass this test. Something like that there. But let's take the what if something bad happens. So what I asked them to do is I'm going to say a phrase, and I might have written that down maybe 2 or 3 minutes, the talking away, and then I'll, change. Right. So let's do a little exercise. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say a phrase. And as I say this phrase, I don't want you to say anything until I say the word repeat. Then I want you to repeat it exactly the way I said it. Okay. So let's go. What if something bad happens? Repeat.
What if something bad happens?
Now, I want you to think of a situation where that would have ran through your head in the past, and think about that situation now and notice what you notice differently. Again, generally when I'm working with a client, they would have mentioned the scenario. I went to get into the car to do my driving test, and I said, I'm never going to pass my test. So I would have said, think back to that day when you sat in the car. Again, we're abbreviated demo here. Can you think of a time?
I can't think of a time, and what I like about this is the gaps in between. It kind of creates space. It does seem to be shifting some submodalities. It kind of feels further away. It feels kind of not quite so emotive.
I mean, there's a second part to this. Let's run through the second part of this, and again, probably bad for purely a podcast. But the second part of it is I'll say once again, and I might get them to do that second time, spacing it out even more. And after that, I then say, I'm going to do that phrase again. I'm going to do it slightly different. Once again, say nothing until I say the word repeat, and then repeat it exactly the way I do it. And I'll do, what if something bad happens? Repeat. If you can remember.
That's the challenge. My acting isn't as good as yours. What if something bad happens.
Right. Now, again, for those just listening, I was making arm gestures, and Adam was repeating those arm gestures. I was making facial movements. I was being animated, in short. And again, what I'll do is ask the client now to think back to that time once again. Now that you've done that probably by a third time, because two elongated ones and an animated one. And again, think back to that time. Now, what we're doing, as you've quickly come to, is and I'll explain this to them, that if and again, this is not to knock CBT. I know some people get great responses for CBT, but generally CBT will say, don't think you can't pass your driving test. Tell yourself you can pass your driving test. You will pass your driving test. And these are good every day in every way. All these affirmations are good to put into your head. But the problem is this other one. What if something bad happens? It's still in there. No matter what you put up here inside your head, the original affirmation, the negative one, is still in there. So we got to mess with that one. Now, I used to ask people, when that's going through your head, does it go through quickly or slowly? But I quickly realized everybody runs through it at 90 miles an hour. And people will say a number like 100 miles an hour, 1,000 miles an hour. I'm never going to pass my test. I'm never going to pass my test. I'm never going to pass the test. They're sitting in the chair. Or in your case, I'm guessing, I didn't ask you in advance, when that phrase goes through your mind, is it going quickly or slowly? What would you say?
It's definitely quickly. I think for anxious thoughts, yeah, and you get this loop, don't you? Because the more anxious you get, the more cortisol you've got, the faster your brain works. It's this spiral.
So you did very well. And again, this is not an ideal scenario because this is not a clear client session. But a lot of times when I say, and I'm speeding it up here, what if something bad? I'll slow it down. And again, I'm watching them. Some people will, when I say, don't say anything until I say the repeat. Do you understand the instructions? They'll say yes. And then I'll go, what? And they'll go, what? No, I didn't say repeat yet. Because that silence is deafening sometimes, and they feel like, did I get the instructions wrong? Should I speak now? And I'll correct them. So it's all part of the process. I love it when I correct them. Right? And then I'll get to the end and I'll say repeat, and I say repeat it just the way I did it. And they'll go, what if something bad happens? They'll say it quickly. Because it's so ingrained in their mind, they're not repeating what I said, they're repeating what's in their head. And it goes quickly. And I'll say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well, where 10's very good and 1's terrible, how well did you do it the way I did it? Well, not really well at all, because you spaced it out. Oh, so you're listening. There's a bit of, and again, I can have this banter, this sort of almost critical sarcasm, but with a serious point, because I'm doing fun stuff from the street hypnosis. So even this exercise has its roots in how I work with people out in the streets. I said, so do it again. And they'll go, what if something? But the gaps will, even with yourself, you didn't leave the same level of gap as me. And there's probably that tension of, this just doesn't sound right. It's not how I speak. But what we're doing is messing, and I'll sometimes use the F word, we're messing with the original thought.
It's a pattern interrupt, isn't it?
We're changing the modalities. And the second half, the animation, again, when they're doing that, you probably stand there stiff going, what if something happens? What if something bad happens? You're stiff, you're motionless, and you're in your head running that pattern. So now we're anchoring movement. And, and I'll do silly faces. What if something bad happens, right? And nobody ever goes, this is silly, I'm not doing this. They run along with the exercise, and it's because it's not silly. What we're doing is anchoring. When I say think back to the time when you were sitting and about to do that driving test, and they go, oh, it just seems silly now. Because they're thinking that silly movements inside their head. They've changed the modalities, not just the speed, but the seriousness of that phrase. Now you can add in your other, every day and every way, and yes, I can pass this driving test.
Yeah, I think it's very powerful. And the thought that came up for me when you were going through that is that obviously you're shifting the tempo and you've got lots of space in between. It's very difficult to kind of get in these loops when you've got that level of space. But I recall a client I was working with in the music industry, and they felt a real hesitation to write new music. And the inner dialogue was, who am I to be writing music? And what I found is that in a different area of their life, if someone said they couldn't do something, that polarity response, like your sister-in-law, would create this kind of like, of course I can do this. So I remember working with that client, and it was exactly the same inner dialogue, but with this kind of almost like defiant, inspiring tonality. It's kind of like, who am I? It was this kind of, and it made it appealing almost to kind of like prove someone wrong. So sometimes you can keep the words exactly the same, change the tonality, and it creates an entirely different emotion. And I guess you get that, that from how you introduce yourself as a hypnotist, that if you said, I'm a hypnotist, I'm going to hypnotize you, it's not going to work because you're projecting something different.
That's it. I mean, I ran a class. It's funny, we're talking about the Irish Hypnosis Convention, and I have to say this is the third year, in 2025, for anybody listening to this way in the future, because I'm sure this podcast will still be listened to in 2030. But next year's 2025 is the third year. It's the first year I'm attending, even though I'm just up the road. It's been held in Dublin. I'm just an hour and a half away in Northern Ireland. The first year, I was actually in England delivering a training. This year, 2024, I actually rang John and said, John, I want to speak. 2024 at your convention. And in the first year it ran, it was in May. And I got on the Zoom call. John, I'm going to talk about street hypnosis. It's a great passion of mine. He says, yeah, we'll have you. And he says, we decided to do it in April instead of May this year. I said, when in April? He says, the 20th. And I went, that sounds familiar. Oh yeah, my son's getting married in Spain that day. So I missed it second time round. So third year I'm there, not missing it this year. And I'm delighted because, again, first time I went to a convention, and I gained so much knowledge from conventions. It's one thing to go on a training program, whether it's a 2-day or a 5-day or even a 6-month program, listen to the same trainer throughout the time. But going to these conventions and hearing an hour discussion here, a 2-hour discussion here, gets you, or I like the way she spoke. I'm going to do her longer training. Don't like the way he, it's not, no offense to anyone that people don't like, everybody has different styles, different techniques, and certain ones will resonate with you. So I gained so much from those conventions. I've spoken now for the 5th year at the UK Hypnosis Convention, as did you last month. So to be speaking without having to get an airplane, it's great. It's luxury, and I encourage everyone. You don't need to be a hypnotherapist or a hypnotist. If you've just got an interest in it, come along. That interest will grow. Like, I mean, look how I did it. I'd no, it sounds terrible sometimes. I sometimes say the phrase, I had no intentions of helping people, but in the context of hypnotherapy, I was just trying to learn this hobby and understand this hobby. And then people said, oh, can you help me stop smoking? And when that worked, I just thought, I need to use this for more than just the street stuff. But I gained so much for street stuff that's helped me. So definitely encourage people to come along to the convention.
Absolutely, yeah.
It doesn't get better than the Irish, I'll say that much.
It doesn't. I would say it's a very similar kind of fun vibe to kind of HypnoThoughts in Vegas, but smaller, and everyone is so friendly there. So if you've been daunted about going to some kind of hypnosis conference, that's a great one to go to. irishhypnotherapyconference.ie. Check us out there, and hopefully we'll see you in April. Turan, it's been fantastic having a chat. I appreciate we've been around the same circles for a long time. We've never actually had a chat before, so it's great to actually kind of connect in this way. And have a lovely Christmas, and I will see you in April.
See you in April. Look forward to it.
Thank you for listening to The Hypnotist with Adam Cox, the show that gives you inside access to cutting-edge hypnosis with real clients facing genuine issues. To automatically receive the latest episodes, please subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, please share this episode with just one friend you think it could help. And if this episode helped you, please leave us a 5-star review.